All right. So thank you everyone for being here. This is Generative Futures for AI in Teaching, Learning, and Knowledge Management, presented by Professor Diane Sieber. And I will hand it off to you, Diane. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. This has been a really great conference. I've really enjoyed it this week. And I will pause every couple of slides to let you ask questions and also for Jessica to take a look at the chat because I'm terrible at trying to monitor chat and do anything else at the same time. So thank you, Jessica, for that. Um, I am a professor in the College of Engineering at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I came out of literature and am now in engineering. So I have a real affinity for all sides of campus being able to talk to each other. And the talk today is actually about a problem that I noticed and a solution that I tried because I thought we kind of needed something. So this is the logo for the Generative Futures Lab for AI. Thanks very much to Everything Everywhere All at Once for the inspiration. And the lab is meant to help faculty, staff, and students figure out how to teach, learn, and manage knowledge with AI. So we're trying to do it by playing. Let me try to advance my slide, which doesn't want to advance now. There we go. Okay, so a couple of general considerations that kind of led to this. Um, the conviction that we're real world educators, I've heard this in a lot of sessions, and I'm really happy to hear it from everyone, that it's our work to educate students to live in the world, to thrive in the world, and to make ethical choices in the world. And so attempting to pretend that AI doesn't exist is a disservice to ourselves and also to our students. The cruelest barrier to entry for AI, I think, is fear. For faculty and staff in particular, there's a sense that it's too late, that AI is ramping up so rapidly that there's really no good entry point, and the suspicion that students are way ahead of us. And then also from the student side, students feel like there's no entry point for them either. So, we've got to start creating sort of, no fault, gentle, welcoming spaces for all of us to figure out what we're doing and to be able to acknowledge to each other we don't know exactly what we're doing. So the creating of the welcoming space, I was thinking of a place where you could face save by dropping in, say, I'd like to just noodle around with something for a bit, or ask somebody else what they're doing. And for faculty, students, and staff to see each other, learning from each other. So we have a couple of undergraduate mentors who work specifically with faculty and staff. We have faculty who drop by and work with students. Um, and basically anybody who's in the lab is willing to help anyone else at any time. Um, the audience, which I just mentioned, is faculty who are really finding it difficult to get started. There are lots of workshops, which are always held at a specific time that for some reason you're always teaching during that time. And there really isn't a way to try to engage outside of regular business hours, which we're trying to help with as well, and also over the summer, which we're trying to help with. So, we're trying to give faculty a basic understanding of how AI works and therefore why plagiarism detectors don't. And also to just give some confidence that you're not going to break something and that you can play and explore. Staff have very few opportunities so far to engage with multiple paid generative AI models. So we wanted to welcome them as well to a student and faculty community because we're equal partners in this, particularly the ethical and safe deployment of AI. And staff are being asked to evaluate and use technologies that they're not actually getting access to in advance. So we wanted also to just create a space for getting comfortable. Students mostly use AI, but they haven't been able to talk about that use openly because it's still, questionable. Should I use it? Should I not? Am I allowed to admit it? The syllabus says one thing, the teacher says another. So they really haven't had a chance to consider in conversation what generative AI does well or poorly and how they can use it to augment instead of circumvent learning. So just making things public, making things discussable, making things shared. The lab also is an open playground. So the ethos is play. This is one of our advertisements to attract faculty. This is the AI Professor Starter Pack, which involves a neural net, a laptop, and definitely lots of coffee. And this is how we advertise around the campus. We're in the Discovery Learning Center, which is an aptly named building for our experiment. And we are called the Gen Fu Lab for short, which sounds a little bit, like we're confronting challenges. And it's again, a playful space. We have displays outside of toys that people have built and 3D printing. But all of this together combines into a kind of drop-in space where you can just get a coffee and talk to whoever's there. So it's a bit of a water cooler situation. Um, we started as a rogue organization with no money, no funding, no space, and somebody lent us a lab for a couple of months, and then it turned out to work. So then we started getting money, which was kind of amazing. So this can be done on the fly with no money. We were just using old computers and volunteer time at the outset, and now we actually have an operation set up on a small scale, supported by the College of Engineering at CU Boulder. Here are two of our other advertisements, the student version and the staff version. The really key thing, which I highlighted here, is we want people to be interacting with each other around these technologies, because so far nobody's quite sure whether they're allowed to talk about them or what they're allowed to say. And we just want to make an open space. So particularly we're focusing on generative text, voice, image, video, and research tools for people in all of these areas of campus. And here's the nitty gritty. We have, thanks to the College of Engineering, we now have 15 laptops, 14 of them new, 12 paid models, which we have a couple that we switch out and several that are standard. So what we've done is set up the same models on every laptop so that it's possible to play with them. And then there are a couple of dedicated machines for things like image and video, which you need to be able to see on a bigger screen. And the text models we have right now are OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and Thesis AI. Um, and we allow people to come in and play with them. We have descriptions above the computers of different ways you can try them out. And these are really largely being used for co-writing with AI, learning about text summarization, personalized tutoring, so learning how to set up your own tutor, study partners, so learning how to create a study group where one member or even multiple members are AIs, conversation practice, and also building basic agents for doing different activities. The models for research that we have are Perplexity Notebook LM and a combination of Julius and Litmaps right now. That changes too. And the main purpose behind these is for people to come in and discover what are ways in which AI can help us with source discovery. What technologies can help us with source mapping. Like, for example, Litmaps will allow you to take all of the texts in the field that you're interested in and relate them to one another through their begats and their references and their citations. Also how to build from scratch a RAG-like knowledge management system, but Notebook LM is one, so that you can see how it works and what kinds of things you might want to achieve. And then also, Julius right now we're using for basic data analysis. It's not great for advanced faculty, but it's a really interesting starting point for new faculty, for staff, and for students. Image generators that we're currently using are Midjourney, Stability AI, and the new GPT-4 for creating visualizations, graphs, charts, producing posters for conferences, images for presentations, and images for class exercises. So as I'll say in a minute, one of the best things about the shared space is that everyone who comes in has an idea of how they can use something for their own discipline. And then we're writing those down and putting them up on the walls. So a faculty member in a foreign language department a few months ago came in and said, I just want to create images that are really interesting and weird to have students in class describe them in the target language. That used to be months of looking through magazines, collecting things whenever you saw them. And now we can tailor specific vocabulary. And I never thought of that before. So we're able to share things like that across disciplines. Um, and then voice generators is actually a new part of this. We're using Cartesian 11 Labs. And this is for recording screencasts. A lot of faculty have said they want to produce more videos for their students, but they get halfway through and they cough or they forget something or they stumble over a word. So this allows faculty to get a clone of their own voice and to write a script so that they can then do a voiceover that is perfectly delivered with no fail points, and all they have to do is advance the slides to go along with the script. So also they're using these for generating podcasts from course notes, which has been an interesting development. So instead of having students suck their notes, their maybe incomplete notes into Notebook LM, you can generate your own set of podcasts or scripts from your own course notes. And then voiceover explanations of image content, which is, another part where I've had to start and stop Camtasia 100 times trying to capture exactly the right way to say something. But this is turning out to be a really useful tool for a lot of faculty to clone their own voices and then be able to deliver whatever they have written down. And I just want to give you, so I mentioned a couple of examples. I want to give you some idea of what happens when you have faculty, staff, and students from, so far we've counted 23 different departments on campus, drop in and talk to each other about what they're doing. And so we're finding that there are a lot of uses for AI that are valuable across disciplines, and that they're really general purpose, but that people are trying to rediscover things in their own fields without realizing what they can learn from, another college. So reading summarization is actually a pretty big one. Um, we discovered as faculty starting about 2 years ago that sometimes students weren't doing the reading, they were generating a summary using ChatGPT or Anthropic or another tool. And so we started developing ways that faculty in different departments could generate a summary using the same prompt that students use. In this case, please consider the attached reading carefully and provide a bullet point summary of its main points. That's actually a pretty sophisticated prompt for some of the students, but we've been able to do this and then show in class to students, hey, how many of you, let's admit it, how many of you actually summarize this? And, a lot of students are actually okay with admitting that. So let me show you the summary, and then let me show you my handwriting on the summary with all the things I want to talk about that were not captured by the summary. This works really well also if you have students reading fiction, if you have students reading research reports. In this case, it was a chapter from a book that was very complex. It was long and it was more likely to be summarized. And so the faculty member said, great, let's try this one. And then I'll write all the things we want to talk about. And that the class was what you see handwritten. But what students would have had prepared for the class was not. So it gave them a sense of the misalignment of using an AI tool for summarization before coming to class. Um, there's a here's an example of a paper rough draft. So this one is mine. I teach writing on occasion. More on that in a moment. And it's been very frustrating to me to get a really ugly first draft when I'm providing opportunities for students to write iteratively. And so now every first draft is submitted first to an LLM, and I hand out different prompts for different projects, but this is an example. Um, you are a kind and supportive university writing tutor who helps students improve their writing in a writing course using the attached rubric, which I've given them. Prompt me with specific feedback to help me turn this paper into A-level work. Do not correct the paper, but ask me questions and make concrete suggestions for how I can improve it. Ask if I need further information or details to complete the revision. So this is how it works. Students are required to seek feedback on their first draft, second draft, and final paper. They have different prompts for each. This is the prompt for the first draft. They submit the second draft and the final paper along with the transcript of the AI feedback. And then they evaluate in a summary paragraph the roles played by human and AI in the writing process. So this could be a cover letter or simply an addendum at the end, so that they're both working with an AI to clean things up, giving me something cleaner so that I can really address the writing issues, and then also reflecting themselves on the role that they played, because trying to figure out which part is your own human autonomy and which part of your thoughts you've decided to delegate to an artificial intelligence is a pretty important skill right now. Here's another example that came into our lab from a faculty member in Spanish. Just getting advanced voice to help you with language practice. So we have lists of prompts again, all over our walls and in notebooks that are near our computers that every time we see something happening in the lab we think is really cool, we'll add that to the list. The prompt is third year student, need to practice interactions, working on this vocabulary, need Castilian Spanish, and then also how to correct me, and then how to tell me at the end how I've done. So this will give you a far more thorough version of a targeted exercise than Duolingo can at this point. And also it's something that students can learn how to do on their own and then apply to everything. And this is actually working well for thermodynamics, where students are asking to be corrected on their explanation of thermodynamics, where students are in different disciplines are teaching the AI in a sense, and then finding out how well they've done at the teaching. This is an example, completely different example of class engagement design. So how do you take a topic that's complex or that you don't normally have groups working on in class and make it not a lecture, but instead an active event in the classroom? And all of the LLMs are very good at this. This is generated by Anthropic, which I think is one of the better LLMs for doing this sort of work. This is a neural network card sorting puzzle um, for an AI class. The professor wanted to get students to physically engage with how a neural network works, to figure out how it sorts things, to figure out how weighting works. And Anthropic was able to generate not just the materials needed, the objectives, and how to set things up, but also the instructions for students and the code you need in order to generate each card. So being able to quickly come up with an activity that works, that gets students engaged in figuring out from inside how a neural network works, is a lot more memorable and proved last semester to increase student performance on first test on neural networks. This is another possibility. This is an example from Notebook LM. How do you get students to engage more actively with course readings? And how do you get them to make connections across course readings? Instead of each day of the syllabus, here's the reading, I check the box. Next day, here's the reading, I check the box. You can preload every reading for your course into a Notebook LM notebook, share it with everyone, and then present a couple of common tools for them to use, like here's the summarized articles that'll keep you from doing it. Here's everything that you might want to know about human autonomy versus AI autonomy. Here are common concerns across all of the articles that we're reading for the semester. And then they have the opportunity to query anything they want of all of the readings. So they can do this themselves, but so far they haven't been doing that. And this is another way to make sure that students see all of the connections among the things that you've curated for a class. And finally, since I used to teach writing and have now resumed teaching writing because AI has made it a lot better, I wanted to just mention this other thing. I teach engineers and I teach engineers writing at times. And Richard Feynman, who is a hero of many engineers, did all of his thinking by writing. He had notebooks I bring in pictures of his notebooks and show the point of recording day-to-day work and then being able to comment on it later. So this is basically a modern version of Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, but keeping a running record of what your ideas are, keeping a running record of your corrections to your ideas, and working out what you think by putting it down on paper is really the point of writing. So to move to this final slide, writing is a product is kind of how we've been teaching writing. You know, the final result is the important thing. That's what you get the grade on, instead of emphasizing writing as a process. And the process of thinking, the process of discovery, the process of uh, translating, the process of translating um, your own amorphous thoughts and beliefs. And finally, the process of iteratively developing your ideas so that you can see them externally and so that you can be judged on the basis of the process you engaged in rather than the final product that you display. So, you know, I think we have so much to gain by using AI. There's so many different ways that it's turned out to be very useful to faculty, staff, and students. And also, it's important to make sure that everybody who comes into the lab talks about what the meaning of writing is. So there are certain things that in writing that are symbolic that have value because of human effort foundation. It's pretty easy to get an AI to write a letter of recommendation, but that's not the point of the letter. The point of the letter is that you, as a faculty member, were willing to take the time to write a carefully considered letter. You can use the help of AI, but there's something symbolically important about that commitment. And just getting people to start sorting through as they come through the lab, what are the things that have meaning because I did them, and what are the things that will have value because I was helped by AI, and what are the things that will be devalued if I delegate this to AI. It's different in every field and it's different for every type of profession. So just being able to have the big questions up on our board and the question of the day on the board and have people think about the bigger picture has been a really great way to engage with people in our lab. So again, to summarize, rogue operation just put together by a bunch of people who thought we needed something. And once it started to show value, lots of other people began to think, hey, we should fund this, or we should advertise this, or we should stop by. And I'll stop because I want there to be time for discussion. I'd love to hear what you're doing. And if you have further thoughts on how to make engaging with AI learning more playful for faculty, for staff, and for students. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Diane. That was great. I would love to kick off questions. Um, I was curious if this is open to all of the institution or just your college, and depending on how you answer that, which disciplines seem most interested based on like
Oh,
if you're
sure.
keeping track.
Yeah, so of course we're definitely keeping track. So the original plan was it was going to be open to anybody who wanted to come by who was on campus, because you do need to have a campus login. So that would be faculty, staff, or students. The funding which materialized came from engineering, which was lovely, but thankfully not with the caveat that it was exclusive to engineering. So we've been able to increase our hours considerably and hire a couple of student staff to help keep the lab open and to be there to help. But anybody can drop by. Of the anybody's who have dropped by, we've had actually a fair amount of interest from early modern scholars. So people in all of the humanities disciplines who work on things prior to 1700. We have had several physicists come by. We've run workshops for groups from several departments. as well. And this actually covers every school and college on the campus so far. It's been there are times when it's quiet and students get to just sit and read a book, but for the most part, there's always something going on. And because of the coffee, I think people is free where you have to pay outside the lab. I think people drop in because there's an espresso and then they decide to stay when they find out something cool is happening.
That's great. Any folks want to share in chat or over mic? And I can keep going with my questions too, if you don't mind, Diane.
No, it's fun. It's absolutely fun. Yeah.
Uh, Um, so you presented a few different models and what kind of umbrellas of function they kind of fall under, whether it's mapping or more of the audio-visual kind of things. It kind of in a similar vein to my previous question, I was curious about which models you find people most drawn to using at the lab and like if there's any trends you notice based on that kind of usage.
Well, most people come in because they want to learn more about the language models. So we're not. I mean, there's so many people in fine arts who are working on image creation that's not our primary go-to. But I mentioned creating posters for conferences. Students have to
Hmm.
create posters all the time. They need to do PowerPoint presentations. So do all of the rest of us. And the idea that you can learn with somebody else who knows a few more tricks than you do, you can learn how to generate an image that is more specifically to your point rather than stealing an image off the internet or just or having to buy something that's very generic. That's been really attractive. And a lot of people haven't engaged with voice yet. So we're seeing a lot more activity around voice, both the voice cloning that Cartesia does and 11 Labs, and also the interacting with voice models. And in particular, we're talking about ChatGPT, advanced voice there. The other thing that's been sort of on the uptick has been writing things like lit reviews. So there are a number of tools that help with that. And that allow you, for example, Notebook LM allows you to upload the 50 articles that you're considering or that you've cited, and then start asking questions. One of the more interesting ones is over the decades, what trends are you seeing in this research? Or over the in each year, do you see a new direction in the research? So there are lots of ways that faculty and staff and students are coming in and sorting things that I never thought of, and that we get to share with other faculty and other participants. And there is a question about whether we have a website. I'm actually
Hmm.
building it right now. We've been so busy that we haven't actually put a website up yet.
Was
But
AI helping you with that?
no, actually,
Oh.
in a former life, I taught web design, so I'm gonna throw something up there myself. But we also are launching a LinkedIn at the same time so that we can start posting daily or at least weekly. Hey, this is a great tip we just found today, so that there'll be always new content coming in from different departments and different groups.
Awesome. I had another question, and again, feel free to come off mic, anyone, or drop questions into chat. One thing that really stuck out to me at one of your final slides was you posed three questions, and one of them included what has meaning because I did it, like it was a human generated piece of writing. And I wanted to create kind of an analog to um, community and peer-to-peer relationships. So one thing that's really interesting to me is, these are AI models that people are trying out. It's digital. In theory, they could be doing these at home if they wanted to pay or wanted to get a trial subscription. But it sounds like one of the things that's really great about this is it is in person. And I don't want to call that a paradox, but that is a human space for people to interact. So I'm curious just about this dynamic between um, learning with just the bot or the AI program individually versus the community space. And if you could just say more about that and how people are finding it within the space where they can talk to real humans as well.
Yeah, I think so. This is kind of the art studio model where, you have a space, you drop in and you learn from the people who are around you. I'm a strong believer in serendipity and, discovering the adjacent thing by accident. And so this creates a space for discovery of something somebody else is doing over there. And there's so much value in that, and so much value in finding people who are interested in the same thing, and therefore finding a collaborator. So, I'm collaborating with a faculty member in the English department on writing courses in AI, and that's an opportunity that wouldn't exist had AI not happened. So I feel that it gives us a chance, again, to create a playground, to make it kind of fun. It's, I think, probably the only room in engineering that's painted orchid, to make it, and has a disco ball. But we get to make it fun and playful, and allow people to feel like there's no stake in this. They're not supposed to know it. To have maybe a more beginner's mindset. And because we have a couple of computers dedicated to specific things, it's a little bit like a kindergarten space, where in kindergarten you had your little cooking area and your blocks area and your Legos area. This way people can sort of migrate and play with different things while they're there.
I love that idea of the like art studio just opening up another space for serendipitous relationship building um, with AI, but
Yeah.
with real humans as well.
And I'll
Um,
add, I'm so tired of reading blogs. For the first year of AI happening, I was reading Ethan Mollick religiously and on blogs all the time, and just frustrated that there wasn't a conversation happening.
mhm.
So this allows us to have actual human discourse over the questions, that arise in the moment. And I like that very much too. So
Yeah, there's a comment here from Ryan. I like how your collaborations promote the exploration of AI from both novices and more experts and kind of a safe space and some overview from perhaps the experts as well in that space. Um, are there
Thanks for
other,
that.
oh,
Thanks for that
yeah.
observation. You can probably tell that my kid went to Montessori. Um, because I do have this sense that you learn best if you learn from people of all levels. In my own technological experience, the only reason I ever had a website, and it was a really early website for a class, was a student said, "Why don't you have a website?" And I said, "What is that?" And she sat in my office for 6 hours over Chinese carryout, and helped me learn how to build a website. So had I not had that opportunity to just sit with somebody who knew more than I did about that, when I knew more than she did about other things, I would never have had an entry point.
Other questions? I want to give some space for questions. I can keep going and I will because I have a couple others, but um, anyone else want to ask Diane a question?
Can I ask a question? I don't know if
Yeah.
people will answer, but I am really curious about playfulness, about where you're seeing any emergent playfulness among faculty or staff or students around AI use, and how could we encourage it?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Lee. I'm a new instructional designer at the UCCS.
Hey.
Yeah. Previously at other institutions that I was also instructional designer, I think my biggest uh, challenge of working with faculty promoting AI for teaching and learning. I think one of the biggest concern coming from faculty is the how to say. Oops, sorry, our fire alarm at the house is so I think one of the biggest challenge for the faculty is they're concerned about um kind of like a how to say like a professionalism in using AI. And then the other is recently I had a conversation with one of my colleagues at the UCCS, and he showed me a article talking about the possible the outcome of causing a cognitive decay with the use of AI. So I'm kind of like a uh, in between. I'm excited, but then also I have my concern based on the concerns and challenges that faculty have raised to me. So I think how can we help them, like adopt AI? I think we can start with the challenges they have or the concern they have. So thank you.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And the big concern about what journals are doing. In fact, we all know that plagiarism detectors can't really work that well, and yet journals are using plagiarism detectors, which means that disproportionately people who are not native English speakers are getting flagged when they write an English language article. I think there's so many concerns in the profession overall, and getting in this case faculty to reorient toward discovery and curiosity and away from fear and avoidance is really important. We've had a few faculty bring colleagues in who've said under no circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. And, just said, look, I'm dropping by. Want to come with me because I'm going to try to see if I can figure out something. So just this, the idea that one person can bring another person into a more open, exploratory mode is fundamentally important for all of us helping each other to get through this. Let's see. Yeah, JSTOR has released a beta research tool that allows you to export a conversation with a bot that exists in a closed JSTOR environment. I have not yet had a chance to play with this, but I'm hearing good things from colleagues who are in the literature departments. So that's yet another tool. It's kind of interesting to watch different organizations start developing their own specific tools that will keep things within their ecosystem. Whereas I think it's also really important right now to figure out how you can build your own tools because currently it's still possible to do that. And by doing that, you understand how all of the other tools work. So this is why um, teaching people how to build a retrieval augmented generator so that they can upload all of their notes and then access them from a database and talk to their own notes over, a lifetime of academic work is not it's hard, but it's not a bad thing to just begin to understand the principles of it. Would it be effective done remotely? Um, we've debated that. I it's I find it really hard right now to talk to this Hollywood Squares or sort of Brady Bunch image. I had trouble with it during COVID, and it's still not my favorite medium. And one thing we found useful is one student has been holding virtual office hours where other students, in fact, no faculty joined in on this, unfortunately, but where some students logged in and they all just worked at the same time. So it was like they were in the lab, but it was after hours, so they were at home. The problem with that is sharing licenses. So, it's possible to do work if everybody has their own license, but in this case, we have a limited number of licenses so that people can play with the paid versions of technologies. They can also, of course, play with any free version, and we have lots of free versions uploaded to our computers as well. Any other thoughts? I realize you have the advantage here because students always have 7 seconds more tolerance for silence than professors do. So I'm happy to wait you out, or to simply say you're most welcome to connect with me. My information is on the Discord channel, and I'll be happy to follow up. Or if you want to drop by and take a look, I'm happy to show you where we are.
Diane, I'll ask you one more question.
Sure.
What's next for um, your lab? Are there any
Well,
projects that are kind of emergent?
so I mean, what's next is my ideal vision of sunsetting, that people will feel more playful, more willing to take risks, more willing to engage, and won't need this kind of support, soon, maybe in a year. Um, and the lab is definitely a temporary space right now too. So I'm hoping that it stays a bit fly by night and a bit do things as we need them. One project that a student is setting up over the summer is a music area, so that we have a couple of instruments and people can play with music editing software in AI as well. It's expensive. We can probably do Spring for a month or two, and then say, hey, this month we'll have this technology, the next month we'll have that technology. So there'll be kind of a flavor of the week. There's also an initiative to put a big screen on the front of the lab so that when we're closed, people can still see AI news as it happens, so that it's kind of a place you might want to stop by and just take a look at. But yeah, I think right now it's the great thing is that we just have people who have ideas. So I don't know what's going to emerge, and I'm really thrilled about that.
That's great. Um, doesn't look like any other. Oh, we have a question.
Okay.
How does the Gen AI lab approach conversations with professors who are hesitant or cautious? So what's the dynamic there?
Well, I think one of the interesting dynamics is that when you think about what it means to be a professor, there's so many different jobs we do as part of that. You know, uh, an email writer, an editor, a dialogue partner, filler out of forms, so uh, a faculty member on campus developed a chatbot that helps you fill out your faculty report of professional activities. So it feels to me that there's so many tiny jobs that we could start exploring first. So, I've had faculty say, "Hey, look, if it would just allow me to write an email to send out to all my students that seems friendlier or that seems not out of touch, that's a really small bite to take." And then once you see how that works, you can start thinking, where are the other places where I won't lose autonomy if I work with an AI on this? Where are some other places where I can speed something along so that I can contact more students? So it's really just finding out, what's the single thing that most irritates you about being a professor, and then what what would it be like to be able to address that? So, I guess there's been a lot of consulting going on to say, yeah, what's your experience? And then let's see if we can help you try one thing. Trying one thing is so much easier than going to a workshop and finding out that somebody else knows 100 things. And thanks for the question.
Any other questions for Diane?
Well, I think we should let people get to their next session. And
Yeah,
I'm gonna log out and race to my next session too, and maybe I'll see you there. But
thanks.
feel free to contact me and through the information that's on our Discord. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for coming.
Thanks all. Thank you.